My name is Joel Klabo. This is my Twitter handle, which I will post all my slides to. Actually, I already did, so if you want to go check those out, they're up there. And I also did a workshop on Monday, which is also posted there. So I'm talking about Flexpilot again, this time getting into a little bit more depth about how to set it up and how to change things if you want to. So Flexpilot is a framework for testing Flex applications. Supposedly you can test Flash applications also, but I've only used it for Flex, so that's the extent of my experience, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. It was built by Matt Ernessy and Adam Christian, who's here, and those are their Twitter handles. I think it was created for Slide Inc., which is making Facebook games and things like that, and has since grown into an open source project, and you can find it at those two links. The Flexpilot X is the add-on to the Selenium IDE, and that allows you to use Flexpilot in the IDE. So there's basically 4 files that you need to worry about when setting it up that are not that easy to set up. I got tripped up by this numerous times. The first being the Flexpilot Swift, which is the Flexpilot code itself. The Bootstrap, which loads the Flexpilot into your application, and then Selenium.py, which could be .py or .rb or .java, which allows you to use the Selenium RC and adds the extra Flexpilot functions, as well as the user extensions, which is the extra. It's all the JavaScript versions of those functions. So I'm just going to go through each 4 of these and say a little bit more about that. But Flexpilot.swift is the actual project, basically, and most people go and downloaded one that's already compiled on GitHub or someplace like that, and that's one way to do it, but you can also compile it yourself to get the latest version, which I'll do later on in the presentation. And last time I checked, there were 13 forks of this, so there's lots of people working on it, and I think most of the good stuff has been pulled into the main branch, but it's worth looking around if something's not working for you. So this is the bootstrap.as code, and I just wanted to show this so you can understand what the init function does later on. So basically this line right here that is the Flexpilot libpath, it explicitly says where it's going to look for the Swift in your project. But in the init function, we override that, and you can set it to whatever location you want to load the Flexpilot Swift from. So this is just a little piece of the Selenium.py, which could be .rb or .java, and shows the Flex, like Flex double click, which is what does the Flex double click. So there's that, and then the user extensions, which is basically all the same functions that are in the Selenium.py, but in JavaScript. So to get all this stuff to work in your application, you start out with the thing on the left, which is just a little MXML file that I made, and then you add in these 3 things on the right, which is, first of all, importing the FP Bootstrap, which imports the Flexpilot, and defining this init function, which right there sets the location of the Flexpilot.swift to in your local directory, but that could be wherever you want. And then finally, you add this application complete event in the application tag that calls init, which will load up the Flexpilot. So after you've done all that, you need to compile your MXML file. And in order to get it to look at the bootstrap, you have to explicitly say to look in that lib directory that we added earlier. So you have to add these source path arguments to make sure that it finds it. And if you leave that out, it'll say that I can't find FP bootstrap. Okay, so once you've got that set up, there's two ways to test it. You can use the IDE, which requires you to download the Selenium IDE, and then the Flexpilot X add-on. And once you've done that in Firefox, you can use the IDE to test your apps and record tests and export tests and things like that. And if you want to use the RC, you have to have the RC, obviously, and then you also have to make sure to run it with this user extensions file, which is a common mistake, is to leave that out. So when you run the server, make sure to add on this argument at the end that it's going to look for this different user extensions file that you're providing that has all the Flexpilot methods in it. So that's basically how to set it up, and I think that should explain what most people are going to do, but you'll inevitably come across something you want to add to Flexpilot or modify. So now I'm going to try and show what you would do to add a method to the Flexpilot source and user extensions and selenium.py, and then we can see if it shows up in all the right places. So I'm going to start out just by showing the working unmodified version. All right, so this is, if you saw the workshop on Monday, this is the same Flex app I was using there. And I'm going to just reopen this. So we should be able to record and everything here. Let's see. So it looks like it's working. Okay. So this is the same state it was at before. And there's all the same commands that it originally comes with, which you can see here. These are all the specific Flexpilot methods you can use. So what I'm going to do is try and go in and add one. It's called flex test, and try and get it to show up in here and then run it in here and the RC. So I'm going to go into the Flexpilot source code that I just pulled from GitHub last night. And this is unmodified. And I'll just open this up in TextMate. Okay, so the file that I care about is the Flexpilot controller. And this is where you can see all the functions are defined here. So anything that you see in the IDE, you'll find defined here. So I'm just going to add one in, just copy one, and change the, I'm looking for click here. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this check, which is basically just a click. So I change this to test. So now supposedly when I call this flex test function, it'll just do an FP controller click the same as if I was doing a check or a radio. So now that that's made, or the change is made, I have to build or compile the Flexpilot. And Flexpilot comes with this build.py file, which I'll show you here. So this basically I changed this a little bit to point at my compiler, but basically this will just build Flexpilot for you. So I'm just going to run that. Okay, so that looks good. So here's the new Flexpilot that just got created. So I'm just going to copy that and switch it out with this guy. Okay, so at this point, the Flexpilot has the function that we want, and we can check. Let's go over here. So we should be able to see it in here at this point. So that's there, but it won't be in the so it's in Flexpilot, but if we tried to use it in the IDE now, it wouldn't be there. And if we tried to use it in the RC, it wouldn't be there because we haven't added it to the user extensions JS or the Selenium.py. So I'm going to go do that real quick. So these names here are a little complicated. There's some stuff that goes on behind the scenes, changing, because obviously I didn't call it either one of these things when I defined it in Flexpilot, but it handles that behind the scenes. So I changed it in Selenium.py. I'm going to go into user extensions and change it there. Okay. So I already added it there. Okay. So now if we go in and reload this and open up the IDE again and look for this new function, it's still not there because we have to explicitly go in and include it in the IDE. So there's a place in options where you can add user extensions. So if you're modifying things, you can just go here and add your file. Okay. Then I'm just going to reopen it. And there's flex test. So I'm just going to make a little test here using this and see if it runs or not. Okay. So now I'm going to go into the Selenium RC and try and run a test that calls this and make sure everything is working correctly. But I have to set up a test that's going to work here first. So I have to add wait for Flex ready, or else everything will just pass without actually executing anything. And open, just so it'll reload. Okay, so I'm going to export this as a Python test. Okay. Okay, so I have my test there. Just take a look at that and make sure that everything's correct. So it looks like this is commented out. I'm going to uncomment that. Okay, so before this will work, we have to run the Selenium server. So I'm going to open that up. And this is where you have to make sure you add the user extensions. Okay. So now we should be able to run this test. See what happens. Okay. So it looks like everything worked, and obviously that's not a very important function to add, but you'll come across situations where you want to add something, and getting the method in all three of those places and getting those all linked up correctly turned out to be a place where I tripped up the most, probably getting things running correctly. So that's all I have for that. You guys have any questions about that? All right, thanks.